Hello and welcome to the GMAP training video series. My name is Erin Sudeth and I'm the branch manager for the Title I Part A Support and Improvement branch at the Kentucky Department of Education. This video includes instruction on the district set-aside page in GMAP. Districts are allowed and even required in some cases to set aside some Title I funds for various purposes. This is the page where you'll input the amounts and explain how those funds will be used. Once again, I have logged into our GMAP test site as a test district for the demonstration. After logging in, I navigated to the current consolidated application and selected the district set-aside page from the sections page, both of which are covered in the general overview and tips video. On the district set-aside page, I can see all the categories where I can reserve funds at the district level. Many of these are optional, but there are some requirements on this page that apply to all districts. As always, if you have any questions about this page, click Help for Current Page in the main navigation menu. And remember that opening GMAP in two browsers can allow you to have Help for Current Pages open and the application open at the same time as you work. Title I allows for set-asides, but there could be a need to consult with stakeholders. Remember from the Introduction District Requirements page, you were asked how your district consulted on the plan. That consultation must also include the amount of funds being reserved at the district level. Sometimes districts may need to set aside a reasonable and necessary amount to carry out some district-level work. However, we would caution you against setting aside large amounts of funding at the district level, and KDE consultants check the set-asides when they review applications. Reserving a large amount of funds at the district level can have some unintended consequences, including decreasing the amount of funds that schools receive, decreasing school and school-based decision-making, or SBDM, council opportunity to effectively implement a school-wide program, including the use and control of funds necessary for the work. District-wide activities may not accurately address individual schools' needs assessments, and/or if the district set-aside is subsequently redistributed to schools, federal rank and serve rules could be violated. A district set-aside guidance document is available on the Title I Part A Documents and Resources webpage, as well as on the Help for Current page within the GMAP application. District set-asides cannot be used to intentionally benefit one Title I school over another, effectively circumventing per-pupil amounts allocated to Title I schools. Personnel working at only one school and any instructional supplies for those schools must come from the school's allocations and not the district set-asides. The following set-aside categories are optional: foster care, locally operated delinquent institutions, professional development, school extension program, preschool program, assessments, administrative costs, sick pay for retiring Title I funded staff, and variations in personnel costs. The McKinney-Vento and locally operated neglected institution set-asides will only apply to districts who receive the McKinney-Vento grant or have neglected institutions. Any set-aside with reserved funds requires a narrative. The narrative should be a description of services provided, not a list of items to be purchased. Title I funds must supplement, not supplant, general, meaning state and local funds. Title I funds cannot take the place of general funds and cannot be used to meet state or other federal program requirements. The foster care set-aside is optional. The district may reserve funds to pay for additional costs needed to transport children in foster care to their schools of origin. Prior to the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, funds reserved for homeless children could be used for this purpose. However, this is no longer the case, and any funds needed for transporting foster children must be reserved here. The homeless set-aside is a requirement for all districts. All districts are required to reserve an adequate amount of funds for homeless children at both Title I and non-Title I schools. Within the narrative, you must provide a methodology of how the amount reserved was determined. There's no set formula for determining the district set-aside for homeless children, although several options can be found on the Help for Current page. The methodology should in some way consider the number of identified homeless children. The narrative should also describe the services that will be provided to the children. Those services must be comparable to those provided to children in Title I schools. Funds must be reserved even if no students are currently identified as homeless. In this instance, funds could be spent on professional development for school and district staff on the identification of homeless students. And there are a number of great resources related to identifying, supporting, and serving children and youth experiencing homelessness, as well as guidance on the allowable use of homeless set-aside funds on KDE's Education for Homeless Children and Youth webpage. The McKinney-Vento grant set-aside only applies to districts receiving the McKinney-Vento grant. Help for Current Pages includes a list of recipient districts and the required amount to be reserved from Title I Part A. These amounts represent the Title I funds the district agreed to use to supplement their McKinney-Vento grant. Locally operated neglected institutions only applies to districts with those institutions. Districts with neglected institutions must provide supplemental services to children in these institutions. The amount must be sufficient to ensure services are provided that are comparable to the district's Title I schools. When using this reservation, please include the names of neglected institutions and the services provided in the narrative. And a list of neglected institutions can be found on Help for Current page. Locally operated delinquent institutions is an optional set-aside. Districts may provide supplemental Title I Part A services to children who are in locally operated delinquent institutions or community day school programs. Districts using this reservation must include the names of the delinquent institutions and services provided in the narrative. Completion of the Parent and Family Engagement Set-Aside is required for all districts. Districts with allocations larger than $500,000 must reserve at least 1% of that allocation for parent and family engagement. GMAP automatically calculates that 1%. Districts wishing to spend more than 1% can increase the amount. However, if you enter less than 1%, you will receive an error message and be unable to submit the application. 90% of that required 1% must be allocated to served Title I schools. GMAP will show 1% in this set aside for districts with allocations of $500,000 or less. However, districts in that situation are not required to allocate 1% of funds. Those districts may reserve additional funds for parent and family engagement or reduce the number at their discretion. All districts, regardless of allocation size, must include a narrative for the parent and family engagement set aside. The narrative must describe how parent and family engagement requirements will be met, even if no funds are required to be reserved. The professional development set aside is optional. Districts may reserve funds for professional development for Title I funded staff and other appropriate staff who work in participating Title I schools. If reserving funds, the narrative must clearly describe the district-wide instructional initiative being supported with the funds. The description should also include justification for personnel to be supported, the district-wide focus of professional development as appropriate, and the district need the initiative is supporting. Districts paying for substitutes for Title I funded teachers participating in professional development should place those funds here. The school extension set aside is optional. Districts may provide before school, after school, summer school, and intersession programs for Title I schools. The district must evaluate all Title I schools and determine if there are sufficient funds to serve all of the schools. If there are not sufficient funds for all schools, then the district may set limits or priorities, such as serving the highest poverty schools or serving the most at-risk students. The preschool program set aside is also optional. The district may reserve funds to serve eligible preschool students in the district as a whole or for a portion of the district. If using this set aside, the narrative must describe the supplemental services provided to preschool programs. Participating schools may use their Title I funds to serve a preschool program within their buildings. The English Learners Set Aside contains both an optional and a required element. Districts are not required to reserve funds in this category. However, all districts must provide a narrative. ESSA Section 1112E3 requires each district implement an effective means of outreach to parents of English learners, as well as notification of a child's placement in a language instruction educational program, or LIEP. The narrative should ensure that districts are sending proper notification of a child's placement in an LIEP, as well as a description of the outreach that will be provided to the parents of EL students to inform them of how they can be involved in the education of their children and be active participants in assisting their children to attain English language proficiency, achieve at high levels, and meet challenging state academic standards. If the district does not have any English learners, please indicate how the requirements will be met should English learners enroll in the district during the year. The assessment set aside is optional. And there has been some concern about the allowability of the purchase of assessments with Title I funds. Administering an assessment by itself does not improve the academic achievement of low-achieving students and would not be an allowable use of Title I funds. However, using the data from the assessment to improve instruction, identify students for supplementary tutoring, and other strategies might improve academic achievement. The district would have to successfully justify and explain how the data from the assessment would be used to increase student learning. Assessments may only be purchased for Title I schools. Administrative costs refers to the direct and indirect administrative costs. This is an optional set-aside. Direct administrative costs may include salaries and fringe benefits for district staff working with the Title I Part A program, such as the program coordinator or administrative staff, professional learning for the program coordinator, administrative supplies supporting the Title I program, or the Title I portion of the single audit. Indirect costs may be claimed to defray administrative expenses incurred by the Board of Education in the implementation of the Title I program. If indirect costs are charged, the program coordinator's salary is the only other allowable direct administrative cost that may be reserved. The FTE of personnel must be included in the narrative. FTE stands for full-time equivalency and refers to the percentage of an individual's salary that is being paid with Title I funds. The substitute salary set aside does not require funds be reserved, but it does require a narrative. Funds may be reserved to pay substitute salaries for Title I funded staff taking sick or personal leave. If the district pays for substitutes for all staff, this must be stated in the narrative. For example, the district pays for all substitutes using general funds. Sick pay for retiring Title I funded staff is another optional set-aside. Districts may cover up to 30% sick pay toward teacher retirement for Title I funded staff proportionate to their number of years in Title I service. An equation to calculate the appropriate amount can be found on Help for Current page. If using this set aside, districts must maintain record of using the calculation to determine the amount reserved. The variations in personnel cost set aside is also optional. When serving Title I schools, there may be variations in personnel costs due to seniority pay and fringe benefit differentials. The district may reserve funds to cover these variations rather than using the school's allocation. The use of this provision must align with district policies and procedures. After entering all of your set-asides, GMAP will calculate the total amount of set-asides and subtract that amount from the total public school allocation. The remaining amount is the amount to be divided among the Title I served schools. As always, remember to use the Save and Go To tool to save your work before navigating to another page. Thank you for watching the GMAP training video series.